Alrighty then, I'm just gonna jump right into this one since there's a lot of ground to cover, but Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is kinda great. It easily stomps the past few years of Disney animation and is an easy contender as not only the best movie in the Shrek franchise, but also one of DreamWorks' best movies overall. There's so much character work, so much thematic relevance and gut-wrenching humor that it's kind of amazing how the Puss in Boots spin-off movie is able to tackle so much so efficiently, like goddamn. This movie is incredibly respectful of your time. There's hardly any filler aside from some very quick transitional montages, but they're gone as soon as you notice them. This movie's ability to make use of a 90-minute runtime so efficiently is kind of phenomenal. If you leave to use the restroom, you will either miss some really good character work, some great humor, or some badass action. So if you gotta wish for anything, wish for a strong bladder. The plot centers around Puss in Boots, who's down to the last of his 9 lives and is being pursued by the physical embodiment of death. Puss is trying to find a magic star so he can wish his lives back, all the while having to race against Goldilocks and the Three Bears and Jack Horner. It's just worth mentioning as well, this movie is one of the better examples of raising the stakes. The reason this works, I feel, is due to the fact that this story raises the stakes on a personal level for our protagonist. For an individual, there's very little that's higher stakes than facing off against literal death. Choosing this sort of conflict for our protagonist opens the door to really understanding who they are. This story operates not only as a deconstruction of a hero due to exposing our hero's vulnerabilities, but a reconstruction of one as he has to rediscover what he values about his life and therefore finding value in his vulnerability. Fucking Puss in Boots 2 has more respect for its main character than the fucking Pirates franchise. A franchise worth $4.5 billion. Let that sink in. The character work in this movie, as I've alluded to, is really something. From the very first scene, the tone is set for how Puss is doing in his life. He's the legendary heroic outlaw who laughs in the face of death until that face finally reveals itself and it scares the shit out of Puss. It's made very clear that Puss didn't value his 8 other lives solely through the way he died each time. I mean, seriously? Knowing you're allergic to shellfish and still going for it? Really? While his deaths are absolutely hysterical, Puss is a cat who has convinced himself he's immortal. Even when he's on his last life, he just laughs at the concept that he could be killed and should retire. The movie makes it a point from the first scene that Puss has never been touched by a blade, and the second that happens, he realizes maybe he should retire. Through the Mama Luna scenes, we're shown a depressed yet institutionalized Puss who dreams of adventures but chooses not to solely out of fear of death. That being said, Puss is Puss. Retirement doesn't suit who he is, or at least who he wants to be. Upon hearing Goldie and the Bears talking about a star that could grant any wish, in some egregious exposition I might add, Puss realizes he has a chance at reclaiming his lives and his legend. Through this adventure, he tries to balance his selfish goal of wishing for more lives with his internal desires of building connections, because Puss's arrogance meant having no room in his life for anybody else. Along this journey, Puss is partnered with Perrito, who is just the best boy. Perrito is a stray dog who has no goals other than to be an emotional support pet. Perrito also has an unrelentingly optimistic worldview despite his depressing backstory. In summation, his owners kept trying to abandon him until they just gave up on subtlety, put him in a sock with a heavy rock and dropped him into the river. But according to Perrito, joke's on them because he got a free sweater out of it. Like, how can you not love this little guy? He is resoundingly supportive, even to people he doesn't even know. Throughout the first 20 to 40 minutes of the movie, Puss really pays no mind to Perrito. He even believes he's delusional at some points. But upon learning his backstory and the fact that Perrito has no intention of making a wish, Puss takes a step back and starts buying what Perrito's selling, and it makes a course correction regarding his worldview. Perrito's worldview is sort of the declaration of the film. It's okay to stop and smell the roses. It's okay to appreciate the things that seem superfluous or obvious in your life. It's okay to roll with the punches and find value in what you have, not what you want. These are fantastic messages that not only resonate with children, but with adults. Adults in our concrete jungles and day-to-day monotony can get lost in ourselves and our lives and forget to truly appreciate what makes life worth living. DreamWorks, you fucking mad lads, this is some great stuff. These are lessons I feel everyone should be exposed to. lessons that will resonate with people for as long as we are mortal. But just as it is in real life, this message doesn't resonate with everyone in the film. Jack's still an irredeemable monster, Death is solely after Puss and doesn't give a fuck about any wish, and Kitty thinks the only way to go about life is to trust herself. Speaking of which, Kitty Softpaws is a pretty solid character. On the surface, it's easy to look at her as just a female Puss, but as the story develops, it becomes obvious there's a lot more to not only her, but her dynamic with Puss. Kitty has trust issues for a multitude of reasons, one of them including Puss leaving her at the altar, something he's incredibly ashamed of. Her wish is for someone she could trust, however, as we're all aware, trust is something that has to be earned, and Puss has already violated that trust. Not to mention the fact that she's been double-crossed multiple times and declawed. Seriously guys, if you want your cat to never trust you again, don't declaw it. Kitty is sort of the spokesperson for the audience. She says what the audience is thinking about Puss as the story continues, however, it's never in an egregious or on-the-nose manner. This is just one role she serves. It later becomes obvious to her that Puss isn't the same cat he once was when he decides to face death head-on as opposed to taking the coward's way out by wishing for more lives. Which brings us to the Wolf of the Hour. I'm gonna be basic here, but Lobo is fucking great. And yes, I'm aware he's death, for fuck's sake, he makes it clear in the movie.
I don't mean it metaphorically or rhetorically or poetically or theoretically or in any other fancy way. I'm death, straight up.
But I choose to call him Lobo since that's what Puss calls him.
I know I can never defeat you, Lobo.
Everything down to the voice acting, the animation.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
Look at how simply he's designed. He's a bipedal wolf with a cloak and two sickles, and yet he holds so much presence. Lobo in the story is the physical embodiment of death who's pursuing Puss with an attempt to take his last life. He acts almost as a force of nature. He doesn't show up on the map, he's just able to walk through the barrier that everyone gets sucked into. He's drawn onto the death cards that are in the beginning of the movie. All of this is really solid stuff for an antagonist, but the movie I think takes it a step further and adds another layer on top of him. Lobo plays fair. He doesn't keep trying to kill Puss once Puss learns the value of his life. He simply departs and says,
Live your life, Puss in Boots. Live it well.
That's why he's the GOAT!
I know people want more Lobo going forward, but I think there's an element that people aren't really considering when it comes to how cool he is, and that's how sparingly he's used. Lobo makes up maybe 20 minutes of screen time and yet is the fan favorite coming out of this film. That's some goddamn presence. If DreamWorks wants to use him more, I would advise cameos or small scenes. Nothing that subjects him to even the possibility of being mishandled, or more furry art being drawn. Since we're on the topic of villains, I think Jack Horner is fantastic. He's hilariously evil and he knows it.
You're not gonna shoot a puppy, are you, Jack?
Yeah, in the face. Why?
I beg your pardon?
I mean, look at this man. Look at the way he's shaped. Look how big his head is and how small his face is. This guy is hysterical and he doesn't even need to speak. Jack's a great addition to this movie. He's aware of how vile and selfish he is, he's an overt antagonist to all parties involved, and he helps serve the overall theme. Jack is inherently selfish and only finds value in what he desires, not what he has. I've seen some chatter online and people have been saying he doesn't have a backstory, which I don't think is true considering this scene exists. Granted, it's no excuse for being an irredeemable monster, but still, it is a puzzle piece. We can see his home in this flashback, which tells us firstly that his family was poor at one point in time, and at some point they got rich and created an entire baked goods enterprise for him to inherit. There is one word that can punch a hole in that, however, and it's this: stability. If what I just said before is true, then he didn't necessarily have stability. Either he can't necessarily remember this moment, even though he explicitly remembers this moment, he's lying to sustain his despicable status, or this is just an oversight on the writer's end. I don't know, I'll go with number 2, just because I feel like giving this movie some good faith. Jack's wish in the movie is to be the master of all magic, all for himself and no one else. This goes back to his past where he was outshined by Pinocchio, not because he was less talented or anything, but simply because Pinocchio was magical. That had an impact on him to the point where he used his wealth and power to collect magical trinkets. Say what you will about Jack Horner, he's horrible, he's evil, he's irredeemable, he was also determined. He didn't stop to smell the roses, he didn't take a nap in the cottage. Nah, when he ran into an obstacle, he whipped out the flamethrower and said, "Keep going." My guy was on a mission, I respect that. Moving on though, I wish there was more to say about Goldie and the Three Bears. This was surprisingly one of the weaker elements of the story for me. Voice acting from everyone in this party is fantastic, however I was left desiring so much more. Goldie essentially has the same arc as Puss. Not that she's pursued by death, no, but to learn to appreciate what's right in front of her just as Puss does with Kitty and Perrito. Goldie's wish is to have a proper family, only then everything will be just right. I find this wish interesting because she could just go out and try to find her real family. I'm sure the bears would definitely help with that, but that's also assuming they're still alive, which is left ambiguous on the film's end. This isn't a situation either where the movie mismanages their screen time, just what we got left me desiring more about her backstory and the necessity of even needing this wish. The movie really does just ask you to trust it and roll with it. The three bears are given pretty distinctive personalities and I really appreciate that. Mama is entirely supportive of Goldie whether the wish will benefit the bears or not. Baby is playful, mildly disrespectful towards the sister and yet loves her nonetheless, and Papa is, well, Papa. The characters for the bears resemble that of an average ordinary family, which I think sells Goldie's lesson. They are a family in all the ways that matter. It doesn't matter if they are bears, they are her family. But that's about all I could really say about them, and that's kind of upsetting. All of these characters work pretty well together. We have an apathetic villain, a villain who's overtly selfish, a sympathetic antagonist, and a rogue who only wants to look out for herself. They all work in service of the overall theme, which is finding an appreciation for those around you and the life you have. A really profound and valuable message that comes into fruition in the climax, where Puss is given the choice between running away to more lives or accepting his vulnerability. And boy oh boy, what a climax it is. I love final fights where it isn't easy for our protagonist. Puss has to fight and fight hard for his right to live. He gets hit, he gets thrown back by an opponent who's stronger than he is, and Puss knows it. And that's the point this movie is trying to make. Death comes for us all, but it's the friendships we make and the value we find in our lives that makes it worth fighting to the death for. Now, let's switch gears and talk about this movie's animation style. There's an obvious difference between this and the other Shrek movies, but the thing I really noticed is...
Hello? Hello?
Wait, what the fuck was that? Hang on,
What is happening?
Wait, hang on, let me... No. No.
Oh! What the fuck was that? Oh, I see. We're talking about Puss in Boots. Well, don't mind if I do. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish has incredible animation. DreamWorks has seriously revitalized their visual style with rich character designs, environments, movements, and color schemes. So much so that it's given Disney and Pixar animation formidable competition, which I'm personally very happy about. The most obvious change they've made is the incorporation of a reduced frame rate whenever there's a high-octane action scene. This is something many, myself included, absolutely love. But one could make the argument that this style is misplaced in this movie, and that it's trying to ride the coattails of Spider-Verse's success. You see, Spider-Verse utilized animation on twos as a way to sell a hand-drawn comic book feel, whereas Puss in Boots doesn't have those same comic book ties to rely on. Spider-Verse's style choices had a purpose to it, and that's why some note this style change as a flaw. My argument against that sentiment is... well, the fact that it looks as good as it does. This may be a subjective thing, but fuck me, seeing the new style parade itself with as much confidence and panache as it does, I was completely smitten. One of my favorite examples is when Puss drinks the coffee at the beginning. The poses are so friggin' tight and each silhouette is unmistakably clear, resulting in punchy, swift, impactful animation. And not to mention, the fight scenes between Puss and Lobo are absolute straight fucking fire. The last one in particular, unironically, hyped me the fuck up. I have watched this scene more times than I can count. The cinematography and choreography are simply sublime here. This is a fucking mic drop of a fight scene. But my personal favorite change they've made was Puss's 3D model. It looks so polished and refined. There was nothing wrong with his original design, it's completely fine. I wish they actually gave him the gloves, though. But here, they made him a lot cuter, for one thing. His eyes are a more noticeable, vibrant green, his facial expressions are much more exaggerated, and his hat got bigger. In the Shrek films, and in his solo film, Puss's design definitely leaned more into realism. Whereas here, they tweaked it to make him more cutesy and cartoonish. And yet, the design change isn't jarring. He still looks on model, he has great appeal, and is unmistakably Puss. I'm beyond impressed with DreamWorks Animation and their efforts to reinvent themselves. It's like watching an old childhood friend thrive later in adulthood. You just love seeing it. I can't wait to see what they have in store, because if it's anything like this, I welcome whatever gourmet shit they're cooking up in their kitchen. And with that,
Give me back my channel.
uh-oh. Ah, jeez, it's happening again. Thanks for having me, guys. And remember to...
I'm back. Okay. Why do I feel like a brony?
That was weird.
Anywho, something I also noticed with this movie is how much the screenwriters and animators love cats. No, not those cats. It's in the story in very subtle ways, like how Puss positions himself, the way his ears react to certain threats. The embodiment of death to Puss is a giant wolf. How is that not an observation most people are making? In one of Puss's past lives, he died from jumping off a tower to prove he can land on his feet. Cat owners will appreciate this considering there's a growing movement against outdoor cats for that very reason. Or, in another death, how fish can be an allergen for cats and is not good for them contrary to popular belief. All of this is really good stuff. I appreciate tiny details like that. It sells the idea that our protagonist actually is an anthropomorphic animal. But now, the time has come, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to talk shit. Aside from all the flaws I pointed out before, the movie has some odd choices. Some of them plot related and others just bizarre. Firstly, who the fuck created the star map? It's implied the star did, since whoever holds the map controls the destination of the Dark Forest, which was created by the star, so is the star sentient? Our characters say the star doesn't want to be found, but then why would it make a map? Is it pulling a Luke Skywalker over here? Like, what the fuck? This isn't a small flaw either, this is a gigantic part of the plot. I can roll with it solely because the character work and themes are really strong, but this plot point is ambiguous at best and conflicting at worst. The movie also loves to play fast and loose with the damage characters take. For a movie centering around the idea of death, it's really conflicting when you show us Puss dying from jumping off a tower, but then Goldie and the three bears land really hard in the Dark Forest and receive no injuries. And yes, the same thing happened to Puss, but the way they visualized it made it more magical rather than an overt descent from the sky. Same thing with the baker's dozen. A baker's dozen is supposed to be 13, but there's as many as there needs to be at times. Like in this fight, people are just dying all over the place, but then they're restocked over and over again. Anyways, Kitty holds a grudge against Puss because of Santa Coloma, but it's then revealed that she didn't show up either. If she didn't show up, how could she have known Puss didn't? Is she lying? Because if she is, then that's surely gonna be a discussion that needs to happen. It seems like the only reason they mention her not showing up is to emphasize that Puss's one true love was himself, when there are more effective ways to convey that information. I think the final fights between Jack Horner and Lobo should have been switched. Puss's fight with Lobo is the culmination of his arc and the overall final stamp of the movie, so it doesn't make much narrative sense why it takes place before Jack Horner. Also, I think it would have added to the overall tension of the situation if the wish was gone during this fight. Going from this to this seems like such an oversight. Switching these scenes takes away very little and adds a lot, like tension and finality. You know, the little things. Kitty's also shown to be in the chest in Jack Horner's factory when she actually isn't. Like she kinda just spawned in the box when it was time for her to enter the story. There's also some interesting fight choreography. This moment specifically sticks out to me where Kitty just defies gravity to do a flying kick at this henchman. Didn't need to be there, shouldn't have been there, why is it there? And finally, I don't know if it stuck out to you guys, and this may be a subjective thing for me, but the writers definitely got their mileage out of the just right jokes. I definitely think they should have excavated some more potent comedic material, considering we have 4 members of this party. Now, before I conclude this review, I think it's important for me to talk a little bit about my standards. This movie does have plot issues, some minor and some major. I'm fine with plot issues, none of these detracted from my overall enjoyment of the movie. Plot is not the end-all be-all of a good story, just as character and themes aren't. Nonetheless, I choose to highlight these issues because I try to notice similar issues with almost all movies. That's what we call consistency. And believe me when I say this movie has earned my goodwill. Being critical of some overt exposition, some questionable plot elements, or certain oversights is not going to tank this movie in regards to my enjoyment, and it shouldn't yours. All that matters is you're consistent whether you really enjoy something or really despise something. With that being said though, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish had absolutely no right going this hard. It's a movie that throws it back to what I loved about the first Shrek film. It's a movie that makes a mockery of fairy tales and yet has something profound to say in its message. It's a movie that made me frustrated only because I couldn't have more. I want more from all of these characters, and I commend DreamWorks for making something really special. DreamWorks really has that big dick energy right now. Between this movie and The Bad Guys, they're kind of on a roll, and I look forward to whatever they plan on doing with Shrek 5. Please DreamWorks, if you're watching this video, keep this exact team because it's legitimately lightning in a bottle. And to all studios out there, please give me more of this. This movie is worthwhile, it will age well, people have already started to champion this movie, and it's so rightfully deserved. I don't see how someone can watch this and walk away thinking it was lame. I don't know what that looks like. Anywho, I hope you all have a good day, thank you for checking out the video, and don't forget to... Hey there everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'd like to give a special thank you to the Underwhelming Unicorn. He was kind enough to help me out with this review, so if you enjoyed him, please go check out his channel. He's not only a great guy, but he makes some great content ranging from underrated animation to some more mainstream animation. His channel will be linked in the description below, and don't forget to be a good boy. Like Jack Horner.